So the measure of an angle that can be formed outside of the circle can be formed by two secants. So that's our first example. Here's our two secants. So secant line goes through the circle twice, not going through the center. It could go through the center, so the secant doesn't necessarily have to avoid the center. As long as you've got two secants that are going through the center, you're good. It could also be two tangents. So here you've got a tangent and a tangent. That creates an angle outside the circle. And then you've got the secant and a tangent. So here's your secant, and then here's your tangent. And they all share the same formula to find the measure of the angle. And that formula is really super easy. I'm going to show you. So we've got the measure of angle 1. That's a little 1 right there. There, make it a 1. We've got the, what I like to call it the big arc and the little arc. So I'm going to call this part right here the big arc. So that secant, those two secants create two arcs. One is a big arc and one is a small arc. We'll call it a small arc because then I can fit it in there a little bit easier. A big arc and a small arc. And the measure of angle 1 is going to equal 1/2 the measure of the big arc minus the measure of the small arc. So this time we're subtracting. So it's 1/2 the measure of the big arc minus the small arc. Let's look at the next picture. The next picture I have an angle 1 right here. And it too has a big arc that's created. So the big arc is going to be on the outer part of the circle. So the outer arc, you can call it, but I like to call it the big arc and the small arc, because then I can just look at it visually. And the measure of angle 1 is going to equal the difference between the big arc minus the small arc. So same formula. It's amazing. Same formula. So let's try it. Let's see if we can find the measure of angle 1 and angle 2 in this first problem. The measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 2. Now, I'm not sure about the second picture, so I don't want you looking too much at it. I can always erase this right here. So for now, I'm just going to cross it out because I don't want you looking at that. We're working on this first one. So we're looking at the measure of angle 1. Well, the measure of angle 1 involves these two red arcs. And the measure of angle 1 is going to equal 1/2 the sum of those two arcs. And the reason it's the sum of those two arcs is because the angle is on the inside of the circle and it's not the center. However, I can tell you that this would work even if it was the center, but that's okay. We're not worried about that. The measure of angle 1 is 60 degrees because half of 120 is 60. Now the measure of angle 2, we've got, oh, look at that. We've got that big arc and we've got the small arc. So the measure of angle 2 is going to equal 1/2 the big arc, which is 70, minus the small arc, which is 26. 70 minus 26 is, drum roll, 44. And half of 44 is 22 degrees. So there's our two angles right there. And that's how we use the formulas. So let's just practice. Let's just do some practice problems and let's see what we've got. We've got to find Z in this first problem here. So we're going to call this number 1. Now number 2 is to the right. Now if you want to do any of these problems, 1, 2, or 3, feel free to work on those problems, and then when you're ready to check your answer, you can just press play. So when you're ready to check your answer, you can come back and press play. Okay, so here we've got our outer angle. So our angle is 20 degrees, and that's going to equal 1/2 the big arc, which is 95, minus the small arc, which is z. And now I get to solve for z. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2, which gives me 40 equals 95 minus z. Then I'm going to add z, subtract 40. I might even do mental math. Z equals 55. So z is 55. Moving on to number 2, we've got our big arc and we've got our small arc, or yeah, our big arc and our small arc. And we know the angle outside, so the angle is equal to 1/2 the big arc minus the small arc. So the angle is 70 degrees. So we're going to put a 70 in for the angle, equals 1/2. The big arc is W and the small arc is 110. You might be thinking there is another way to do this, and you're right, there is another way to do this, but I'm going to use this way because it reinforces for us our formulas, and the more practice we get with the formulas, the more we will understand and not have to study and memorize. So W equals 250 degrees. So you think, now that you know it's 250 degrees, you go back and think, is there another way to do this without using our formula with our angle outside the circle? Okay, go ahead and try this next one. If you did not try 1 and 2, please definitely try number 3. We've got y equals 1/2 the big arc minus the little arc. So that's half of 80, which gives us 40. So y is equal to 40. And those are those 3 problems. And you can see that we're going to have some more practice over here. We're going to be talking about segments. So the last bit will be segment length. So this concludes angle measures and arc measures. Make sure in the practice, it's important for you to work on that practice that I provided, because there will be several of these types of problems where you've got to find a measure of angle 1, maybe a measure of angle 2, and they'll give you some different values there. In fact, I'm going to make something up here. So I'm going to say that the measure of this angle, let's say this is 25 degrees, and let's say that this angle is 63 degrees, and let's say that the measure of let's just do that. Let's just do that. So see if you can try that. See if you can find the measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 2. Well, the measure of angle 1 is going to equal 1/2 25 plus 63. So that's half of 88, which is 44 degrees. I actually did pretty good there. And angle 1 plus angle 2, that's a linear pair, so that equals 180. So if I put the 44 in for angle 1, I'll be able to subtract it from 180, and angle 2 is going to equal 136 degrees. So angle 1 is equal to 44, and angle 2 is equal to 136. And those are both in degrees. So you'll have some of those in the practice. It's important for you to get some practice with that so that if you see these problems on a final exam, you know how to do them and you've gotten enough practice that they're not completely unfamiliar to you.